Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well. Now, there was something else that I have thought about recently that I didn't bring up in any of the videos I've done or my live streams, and that would be regarding digital ID. Tony the War Criminal Blair tried to bring in ID cards, which the British people very thoroughly rejected because it would effectively, I guess, bring in a situation where you could very, very easily get a hold of one of these little ID cards and you can effectively very easily replicate somebody else. These ID cards also felt like you were basically going to be forced to bring these things to do whatever. But now, here we are, modern times, where we have Kier The Traitor Starmer, who is trying to bring in digital ID, who is trying to bring in facial recognition. And normally, I'd say, well, I'm all for having stuff that allows us to recognize who people are, but the trouble is, I only believe that shit is useful when it comes down to, like, criminals on a database. What Kier The Traitor Starmer is doing, though, is he's hoping to be able to bring up ordinary people, like the far-right patriots and the parents who are concerned for their kids, who went out and protested. And I know there are going to be some left-wing NPCs who come out and say, oh, but they were robbing Greggs. Like, fuck off. Seriously. Not everyone was doing that. And obviously I'll condemn anybody who has been doing that or doing the violence and all that nonsense. But you need to understand, a lot of the people who went to these protests around the main points, in particular Southport and Downing Street, they did it because they wanted to show empathy for the kids. And they were saying chants like Rule Britannia, save the children, protect the children, etc., etc. They were quite rightly angry at what's been going on. This is old news that I don't really need to bring too much on because I've already mentioned it many, many times. But as far as this ID thing is concerned, I think this ID thing, the digital ID and the facial recognition that Kier The Traitor Starmer is bringing in, I think is effectively going to turn us into a 1984 Orwellian state. Think about it. Why else would he be cracking down on the supposed far right, even in some cases where it's clearly apparent that nobody's turned up for these things because we've started to realise they're all a trap, that they're merely there to bait us in so that they can get angry Muslims to come out and attack us. That's what it boils down to, because they know they can do this to aggravate the Muslim youth, put simply. Let me be clear on this as well, because I know there's probably going to be a couple who shout, racist! I am not saying every Muslim is like this. I'm not saying every Muslim youth is doing this. But there will be some people in the Muslim youth who want to pick a fight. Just like on our side, there are people who want to pick a fight, who I do not condone at all. But that is the cold, bitter truth. They wanted to bring us out and bring in the angry sect of Islam to basically go at loggerheads with one another so that he can justify bringing in these laws so that he can be like, we need this for your protection. Well, what was that 9-word response that somebody said? Was it Ronald Reagan? The 9 most disturbing words, the 9 scariest words people want to, or don't want to hear is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. That's the way I look at that. He wants to bring in the ID, he wants to bring in the facial recognition so that he can control everyone. We are literally headed to China's social credit score system, where you are given a social credit score, and if you're doing something that is deemed to be positive and in favour of the government and in favour of the status quo, your social credit score will go up. But if you do things that the government dislikes, for example, attend anti-government protests, attend vigils for protecting children because clearly they have a problem with that, if you speak out negatively against the government, etc., then your social credit score will go down. And I suspect what will happen is they'll also make it so if anybody interacts with people with a low social credit score who have been known by the government to be troublemakers, it'll probably bring their social credit down as well. But this is the thing. If they bring this in, all they're going to do is they really are going to bring about a revolution for the country. They really are. The way I look at it, if they do this, there will literally be no stopping the British people from realising what the hell is going on in this country. And while I will never condone violence, I will never condone going after these people with violence. It's like I said before, when you make peaceful resolution impossible, you make violent revolution inevitable. Richard Inman also needs to be called out a little bit about this, which I will do that in a moment. But right now, I want to focus on the social credit score thing. At the end of the day, they're doing the facial recognition, they're doing the digital IDs and all that shit, because it'll effectively give them the means to identify dissidents, and then the government can be like, right, get them off our streets. And anybody who is against the establishment will be taken away, locked away. Even worse still, they may even attempt to re-educate them. But of course the mainstream media won't tell you this. You know the drill, folks, because say it with me, it doesn't suit the narrative. They will take people away, they will make sure that they cannot cause trouble, because they want to live in their little utopian bubble where, or it might even be an echo chamber for all I know, where they only ever hear good things. They surround themselves with yes men. Like, yes, this is all fine. No, this is not all fine. This is fascism. This is 1984. George Orwell would be spinning in his fucking grave like a tumble dryer. I swear to God. You can't expect people to put up with this, Kier the Traitor Starmer. You will literally have a revolution like you will not believe if you try this. Reconsider. Because the way I look at things, I may say I do not condone violence, but what I will say is that anything that happens to the government, the two-tier police, and the mainstream media at this point, they only have themselves to blame. That is the closest I will ever get in any video I ever post in my life of advocating for this shit. And let me be clear, I completely condemn violent revolution. But anything that happens to them at this point, as I said, they have only got themselves to blame. It's like if you've got your cooker on and you put your hand on a currently active hob, and then you obviously touch the hob, fuck me, that hurts. And then you decide, oh, you know what, I'm going to do it again. Then you only have yourself to blame for finding out. FAFO. Now, Richard Inman. Richard Inman. I said in my last video, or my live stream, I should say, that I have to call something out of Richard. And he said that basically, we have got to vote this government out in 5 years. I have mentioned this many, many times, and I'm going to say it here again. We don't have 5 years, Richard Inman. We'll be lucky if we have 1 year, let alone 5. And do you really think people are going to wait 5 years for this shit? Now, if Kier the Traitor Starmer was more like Rishi the Slippery Sunak, maybe I could be like, you know what? Yeah, maybe we could last 5 years. But have you seen the way he is dictating the country? Or maybe I was right first time. He is literally after the far right. He is after ordinary people. He is after concerned parents and patriots. He is after people who go against his agenda. He has got police going after people and arresting them for an inaccurate social media message. He's got people going around arresting a man for a fucking Facebook post, calling some of the people out there filth. I'm sorry, Richard, but I have to call you out on this. We don't have 5 years. You'll be lucky if we have 1 year, let alone 5. I cannot stress that enough. As much as I am on the side of wanting peaceful resolution, we are increasingly rapidly approaching a stage where violent revolution is going to break out. It's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. Because do you honestly think people have got the patience to sit there and take being ruled under a regime like this as extreme as this? He literally makes Stalin look like a nice guy. He literally makes Tony the war criminal Blair look like a saint. This traitor will sink this country faster than you could ever imagine, and he'll do it while jailing his political dissidents. He wants to silence all political opposition through his actions. That unequivocally makes him a fascist. Do you think he's going to stop there, Richard Inman? I don't think so. I think he's going to double down, triple down, and quadruple down. I think he's going to keep going with this shit until there's literally nothing of us left. He is going to keep going until people like me and you, Richard, directly, he's going to keep coming after us until people like you, people like me, people like Paul Thorpe, people like Tommy Robinson, people like Maya Toosey are in prison. Because at the end of the day, he is a socialist wanker, bluntly speaking. He is not going to give two shits whether or not we conduct ourselves peacefully. He will always try to find an excuse to try and get rid of us. Because that is the kind of man he is. Bear in mind, folks, Kier the Traitor Starmer was one of the people who decided to break COVID lockdown rules. When we were told we couldn't go out and meet our loved ones or celebrate Christmas, he was out partying. Even when the Queen's fucking husband died and she was mourning him at a funeral, he was partying, which is something, of course, the mainstream media don't want to tell you. That's the kind of traitor we're dealing with here. Someone who prioritizes his own personal gains versus showing sympathy and empathy to our now dead Queen. God rest her soul. And you want us to last 5 years, Richard? Not happening. Even celebrities like Ricky Gervais are basically saying this country needs a revolution. When even celebrities are saying this shit, Richard, you have to open your ears and listen. You have to understand that we are on the brink of civil war. This doesn't stop at the supposed far right, my friend. This stops when all political opposition have been removed. Think about it. Why do you think Kier The Traitor Starmer is still allowing this migration to continue, and I think he's even made it worse within the first month. Why do you think he's continuing this? He's continuing this because he wants to hold on to the Muslim vote. Because at the end of the day, they're the main people who are going to vote him in. Because he has aligned himself with Islam. Remember, he said he will do everything he can to protect the Muslim community and its mosques. But he never said anything about wanting to protect Christians and their churches. What say you, Richard Inman? Do you not think that that makes him unequivocally a traitor? A dictator? A man that is, quite frankly, horrendously dangerous, and someone who will stop at nothing to ensure that his enemies are removed. And I'll bring something up as well that mainstream media are not going to want to touch with a 10-foot pole. You remember how he's against all this violence, against the far right, and against these protests? What if I were to tell you that he attended some of the protests when Margaret Thatcher was in power, where hundreds of officers were injured, hundreds of people were arrested? He attended a couple of those violent protests. What say you, Kier The Traitor Starmer? Do you know what that makes you? Makes you a hypocrite. Pot, kettle black. Or in this case, white, because I couldn't get one in black. Anyway, this makes him a hypocrite on the highest level. The fact that he was willing in his younger days to go out and protest on these violent protests against the police, against Margaret Thatcher, he is a hypocrite. Hypocrite, traitor, fascist, socialist, communist. That's quite a list of names, Kier The Traitor Starmer. Now it begs the question, what's the longest name I can give you? Quite frankly, I already came up with Kier The Traitor Starmer. But at this point, maybe I should call you Kier the Violent Thug Traitor Starmer. Or is it Kier the Violent Thug Hypocrite Traitor Starmer? I can't make up my mind right now. I really can't. Because that's a lot of fucking things to... That's a lot of pies to have your fingers stuck into. And yes, some people are going to use that to attack how I look and what have you, but fuck them at the end of the day. I may be 19 stone, but you know what this is? This is 19 stone of fucking truth. I did look this up, by the way, those protests. I know he's been to at least 2 of them. So I wonder when Kier The Traitor Starmer is going to come out about this. Because surely he should know about people's democratic right to protest, but he seems more interested in trampling on people's liberties. He seems more interested in eliminating his threats rather than doing his job and protecting the country. Because as I've said before and will say again, his duty to this country is to protect the realm and all of its inhabitants, not one section of the community, namely Sunni Islam. Like I said, we don't have 5 years. When people like Ricky Gervais is telling us we need a revolution, I think it's time we listen. Because there are people who have genuine concerns about this country, who believe that we're at a stage where peaceful resolution is impossible. I don't want that to be the case. I'm sure you don't want that to be the case, Richard Inman. But at the end of the day, we are literally heading towards a situation where if we don't act soon, we're going to have no country, because it'll become the United Kingdom of Islam rather than Great Britain or England. How would you feel, Richard Inman, if your country became the island of Islam? I don't think you would want that, would you? Since Britain and Ireland are founded on Judeo-Christian heritage. I may not be a fully fledged Christian, and I may not even like children that much, but I do understand the need to protect them, and I am empathetic to them as far as their need to have a bright future. Not every child is a little shit. And obviously, we need to teach Judeo-Christian values to the kids and to anybody who comes over here. We need to teach them without proselytizing to them. We need to show these people what great society we are, what great people we are. That's the way I look at it. But as I said, Richard, you need to understand, we don't have 5 years. If we were under the Conservatives for 5 years, I'd be 100% on your side, because I know deep down there wouldn't be as many violent protests and riots and whatever happening down the country right now. But the trouble is because of the way Kier The Traitor Starmer has been handling this situation, which I shall point out that about half the people in this country believe Kier The Traitor Starmer has handled these protests poorly. There are polls out there for it. Don't just take my word for it. Half the people think he's done a piss poor job of handling these protests. That should tell you a lot. Hell, less than half the people think that Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, is doing a good job. Speaks for itself, doesn't it? And as for Jess Phillips, well, she's already put tweets out saying that she's basically encouraging mob rule. So, again, this should tell you the kind of people we have in power. Like, if it was still Boris Johnson or Rishi the Slippery Sunak in power with their cabinet, as much as I may not like them, at least I could safely say, well, in 5 years we'll be able to vote them out. But with Kier The Traitor Starmer, I don't think we've got 5 years to wait. We'll be lucky if we've got 1 year. At the rate we're going, we might be even dead in 6 months, quite frankly. I know you're not going to like me saying that, Richard, but sometimes even people like you need to swallow the cold, bitter truth. And swallow that pill, you most certainly will, because I've had to many, many times. But who am I? A 33-year-old, 19-stone man just ranting into a camera. Oh, but I wouldn't have the balls to say this to people. No, I would. Because unlike a lot of people, I'm not afraid to sugarcoat anything. Sorry, let me rephrase that. My sinuses are getting blocked. I'm never going to sugarcoat anything. I don't mince my words. I will say it how it is. And I will do my absolute best not to bullshit you. And if I do make a mistake, unlike the mainstream media and our traitorous establishment, I'll admit my mistake and say I'm sorry, I fucked up. Would you see that from them? You'd be lucky to see that in a month of Sundays. But if Kier The Traitor Starmer keeps going down this route of wanting to bring in a potential social credit score through the digital IDs and facial recognition, he is going to have the biggest shitstorm on his hands. And he really will solidify and cement himself as the biggest traitor in UK history. Because, yes, Tony Blair has caused 1 million, 2 million people to be killed, including some of our own British soldiers. But Kier the Traitor Starmer is on the verge of having millions of innocent people take to the streets in civil war and spill blood to protect this country. That's the way I look at it. And if we think that we're going to be able to resolve this in 5 years, I think we need a wake-up call at the end of the day. I think the whole country needs a massive wake-up call. Because Kier the Traitor Starmer has already tried to bring in his own little ersatz army with this protest response force, I guess you could call it. How he wants a police force to be able to stand by, and rather than have to wait 5 minutes for this shit, he can just bring these guys in and they're ready to deal with it there and then. And you'll always notice how he's always willing to bring down the hammer on far-right people. Riot squads with shields, batons, tear gas, horseback police, guard dogs, you name it, they bring it for us. But they'll never do that for Islam. Or I should say, almost never do it for Islam, because they've only done it a select few times with them. Predominantly, they say that shit for us. Two-tier policing. Our media only ever want to portray one side of the story, usually Kier the Traitor Starmer's side. Two-tier media. And our government has a traitor and a hypocrite that supported these protests back in the past when it was against Margaret Thatcher. That is two-tier Kier the Traitor Starmer and a two-tier government who wants to crack down on one section of the people while protecting another section. Last time I checked, Kier, your duty is to protect all of us, not one group. And I think at the end of the day, you are making a grave mistake trying to bring in facial recognition, to bring in digital ID. We widely rejected this when war criminal Tony Blair tried to bring in ID cards. Do you know how easy, if we had ID cards now, let's bring this up as an example. If we had ID cards now, all the illegal immigrants crossing over to the shores right now would have to do is find somebody who is willing to forge out ID cards and give them out to all these people, and all of a sudden, oh look, yeah, there's their ID, they look good, right, let's bring them in. Also, bear in mind that they can obviously bring fake names, they can do whatever with these, and I don't think they're going to highlight the illegal immigrants' criminal records and what have you. That's the thing. The people crossing over to our shores, we don't know who they are, we don't know what they've done, and we can't vet them because they're not going through airports or seaports or whatever. Make of that what you will. But I think it's important that we're able to identify these people, because otherwise we're letting every Tom, Dick and Alice snack bar into this country who could potentially harm us. And last time I checked, as I said, we're supposed to be protecting the realm and all of its inhabitants. But right now, Kier the Traitor Starmer is more interested in appeasing the Sunni Islamist extremist groups and Islam itself for his votes so that he never loses power again. Well, I think at this point, we need to do something about it. We need to take out the trash and place them in the dustbin of history. I've got a little bit of trash myself I need to take out. A whole bunch of it, in fact. So join me, folks. Let's take out the trash and put it in the dustbin of history. Let's make sure that Kier the Traitor Starmer is given a very thorough message that we are not tolerating this from him anymore, and if he does not buck up his ideas, then it's only a matter of time before a violent revolution breaks out, which I will never condone. I condemn it, but I completely understand why the people would go down this route. And when they do, the army will get brought in. The army will mostly side with us because they can see the ordinary Brit getting stitched up by the government, and then we're going to have blood on the streets, which I'm pretty sure me, Richard Inman, Tommy Robinson doesn't want. But the cold, bitter truth is, they're going to see that there is no other way to solve this, because we've been too soft and they believe they can walk over us like a doormat. Well, let's show them we've had enough. And if you do not enact the will of the British people, if you do not side and protect the British people, then we will do what we've always done with traitors back in ye olde times. We will take out the trash, place them on a spot on the gallows, and we will make sure this country is run by people who actually care.